The attacks have resumed after a few days of pause and release of hostages. The war in Gaza is on again. Israel is targeting the south of Gaza, and striking Hamas tunnels. Some of the videos are unbelievable. Meanwhile, the Red Sea is on the boil. The Houthis are attacking ships, including American warships. We'll tell you how the tension is building up all over again. Meanwhile, the Philippines suffered a terrorist attack in a region that has a history of Islamist extremism. The crypto market is on fire, with Bitcoin seeing a major surge, plus gold is on a record high. We'll tell you what to buy. At the COP28 in Dubai, is politics impeding progress? With rising unemployment, no savings and record debt defaults, is the Chinese dream dying? What's the new zombie drug, 50 times more potent than fentanyl, that is causing holes in the skin of users? Why an alarming number of Indian cough syrups are failing quality tests, and how it could poison brand India. And why Venezuela and Guyana are locked in a dispute. All these stories and more coming up. The headlines first. Ukraine aid will run out by the end of this year, warns the White House. In October, President Biden asked Congress for $106 billion for Ukraine and Israel, but some lawmakers are against further aid for Kiev. Since the war began in 2022, they've given $40 billion in military aid to Ukraine. Iran and Cuba seek closer ties to counter American sanctions. The announcement was made during the Cuban president's visit to Tehran, the first such visit since 2001. Since 1962, Cuba has been under a US embargo, while Iran is facing sanctions linked to its nuclear program. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's corruption trial resumes in Israel. It was suspended after Hamas's terror attack on the 7th of October. Netanyahu is accused of fraud and breach of trust. He is Israel's first sitting prime minister to stand trial. Guinea-Bissau dissolves its parliament after a coup bid. There have been clashes in the capital since Thursday. In 1974, the country gained independence from Portugal, and since then it has seen numerous coups. The most recent one was in February 2022. Rains batter southern India ahead of cyclone Migjom. Chennai is witnessing its worst rain since 2015. At least 5 people have been killed. The flooded airport is shut. Several flights cancelled. Schools and offices closed. The cyclone is expected to hit the coast of Andhra Pradesh tomorrow. And sorry, Swifties, but Riz is the Oxford word of the year 2023. It's a Gen Z term meaning charisma. Riz beat contenders like situationship, de-influencing and Swiftie. According to Oxford, Riz was first recorded in 2022. The truce is over. Israel is striking Gaza again. Some 200 targets have been attacked so far, and this time there is no safe zone. Even southern Gaza is on the radar. One such attack was on Khan Yunis. It's a city in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. Thousands of Gazans were asked to take refuge in this city, but today morning it was attacked. Take a look at the aftermath. So what is Israel's mission this time? It's the tunnels again. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, claims to have found 800 plus shafts leading to the tunnels. Around 500 have been destroyed. And it's not just how many shafts have been found, it's about where they have been found. Israel says in schools, mosques and playgrounds. They've released footage as well. Take a look at this.
זיהינו פיר במרחב, בתוך המסגד. שכונת בקשי, בתוך מסגד נמצא פיר.
It's not surprising, though. The Hamas has built a vast underground network. By their own account, it's 500 kilometers long. So Israel is back to dismantling it. But what's the end game here? Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the media this weekend. He made 2 important statements. 1, he wants to protect civilians in Gaza. And 2, he wants to eliminate Hamas. A complete victory, as he called it.
We have a desire to avoid harming the population. We have a very strong desire to hurt Hamas. In order to complete the sacred mission of returning all our hostages, to eliminate Hamas, and to ensure that Gaza does not return to pose a threat to Israel, that it does not contain an entity that educates its children for terrorism, that supports terrorism, that finances terrorism, that calls for the destruction of Israel, we continue to fight with all our might.
But here's the problem. These two goals are conflicting. Israel has not been able to protect civilians and eliminate Hamas. At last count, more than 15,000 Gazans have died. Out of them, 6,600 are children, more than 41,000 are wounded, and 6,800 are missing. So Israel is at risk of failing both objectives. A, civilians are dying, and B, it's turning more and more Gazans into hardliners. Just think about it. 6,600 children are dead in Gaza. 6,600 children, that's more than 10,000 parents who had to bury their child. Will they ever agree to peace with Israel? That's the strategic downside of this invasion. French President Emmanuel Macron raised this concern. He said it could take 10 years to destroy Hamas. Listen in.
What is the total destruction of Hamas? And does anyone think it's possible? If it is, the war will last 10 years. And I don't think anyone can seriously define this objective. So this objective must be clarified.
It's a worrying assessment. And forget 10 years, every day this war drags on is a regional risk. Just look at what's happening in the Red Sea. At least 3 commercial ships have been attacked. 2 of them have been claimed by the Houthis. And we've discussed them before. The Houthis are an armed Shia group in Yemen. They're backed by Iran. They're also allied with Hamas. Last month, the Houthis declared war on Israel. And now they're attacking ships. Here's what we know so far. The first attack was on Unity carrier. It's a Bahamas flagged ship. It was struck by a Houthi ballistic missile. 2 Panama flagged ships were also targeted, Number 9 and Sophie 2. They sustained damages but no casualties. Now when ships are attacked, they send distress signals, sort of like a call for help, SOS. In this case, the response came from an American warship, USS Carney. It shot down 3 Houthi drones. But chances are this face-off is not over because the Houthis have promised more attacks until the war ends.
The Yemeni armed forces renew their warning to all Israeli ships or those affiliated with Israelis that they will become legitimate targets if they violate the content of this statement and previous statements issued by the Yemeni armed forces.
2 issues here. One is obviously the impact on trade. Around 10% of global trade passes via the Red Sea. If this region is not safe, it's trouble for the world economy. More volatility, more cost, and more expenses for all of us. The second issue is security. We mentioned that the US warship shot down 3 drones. One of them was heading its way. The drone was heading towards the American warship. In other words, the Houthis targeted an American warship. Plus, you have attacks on US bases in Iraq. Dozens of them since Israel's offensive. Dozens of American bases have come under attack in Iraq. So how long before the Americans strike back hard? Or before the Iranians decide to join? I ask because the signs are not good. Even Hezbollah has resumed attacks on Israel. They struck 5 positions along the border. Of course, Israel hit back. At least 1 Hezbollah fighter has been killed. So where do things go from here? Well, Israel is not slowing down. If anything, they've picked up pace after the truce. They're also looking for evidence that will drum up support for their offensive. The tunnel videos are one example. Meanwhile, the world is losing interest. As always, people are moving on to the next big story, which is why groups like the Houthis are escalating things, trying to keep the focus on Gaza. The only hope is that Israel's allies will put pressure on them, the likes of Joe Biden, Olaf Scholz, and Rishi Sunak. If not, there may not be a Gaza left for a ceasefire. Let's turn to the Philippines. It suffered a terror attack yesterday, a bomb blast. People attending a Catholic mass were targeted. Reports say 4 of them were killed, dozens were injured, some are critical, fighting for their lives. So who was behind this attack? ISIS or the Islamic State. They've claimed responsibility. Now look at where it happened. A university gym in the city of Marawi. That's where the Catholic mass was being held. Now Marawi is a city in southern Philippines. on the island of Mindanao. And Mindanao has a history of religious extremism, but we'll get to that later. For the moment, let's update you on Sunday's attack. Like I said, Catholic worshippers were on target. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has called it a heinous act perpetrated by foreign terrorists. He has put the army on high alert. The suspected attackers are still on the loose and a massive manhunt has been launched.
So we have alerted also our units, all of our units in Mindanao, as well as our other units, just like with the Philippine National Police here in the Metro Manila area. So that is the update from the AFP side. We are continuously gathering intel operations so that we will be able to run after the perpetrators of this terroristic attack.
The Philippines sees the bombing as a threat to its national unity. That's what they've called it. An attempt to stoke religious tensions.
Let us remember that this was done in a religious occasion in Marawi, and the intent really to foment terrorist activity, to foment confusion, chaos, is a prime indicia of a terrorist activity.
Officials say the explosive was made from a mortar round. Shrapnel ripped across the gym as the bomb went off. Fragments and blood covered the scene of the attack. One of the survivors recounted the horror.
We went to the 7 a.m. Mass. Everyone was focused during the Mass. Then during the first reading of the priest, there was a sudden explosion. Everybody started running, and when I looked back, I saw a number of bodies on the ground.
This has been the story of the Mindanao province. They have a history of religious extremism. For years, the Philippine Armed Forces have been fighting this. In fact, a day before the Catholic Mass bombing, Manila launched one of its biggest anti-terror operations of the year. Even fighter jets and attack helicopters were deployed. Reports say 11 Islamic terrorists were killed, which brings us to the question, was yesterday's bomb blast an act of retaliation? Manila is not ruling out the idea. Listen to this.
Natin against the terrorist groups in the whole area of Western Mindanao, dito sa Maguindanao, sa Lanao, and dito sa Basilan, maaring retaliatory attack yung nangyari kaninang umaga. No? So that is one angle that we are looking into.
And this is not the first such attack. The city of Marawi has been attacked by the Islamic State before. In 2017, Marawi saw a 5-month-long siege, a battle between the Islamic State and the Philippines, the government of the Philippines, their army. Hundreds of civilians were killed. Thousands were wounded. Eventually, the Islamic State was defeated, but the city was left in ruins. Since the siege of Marawi, smaller extremist groups have continued to launch attacks. Sporadic bombings have been carried out in public areas. The victims have mostly been civilians. Yesterday's bombing is the latest such instance, and it has raised some unsettling questions. Is this the return of religious extremism? Classes have resumed in the university, but with a much higher security presence. The Philippine army is combing the area, looking for the suspects behind the blast. They're in a hurry to neutralize the terrorists, because the resurgence of the Islamic State and a repeat of 2017 is the last thing that Manila wants. Bitcoin is back in the news. Talk about a 2020 redux. First, a mystery illness in China, and now a Bitcoin surge. It's like the last 2 years never happened, but they did. And this new Bitcoin surge is very different from the last one. Let me explain how. Bitcoin is trading at $41,000, meaning one Bitcoin equals that much, 41,000 US dollars. And why is that important? Because the last 2 years have been tough for Bitcoin, 2023 and 2022. The last time it was trading above $40,000 was in April last year, 2022. And since then, it's been a tumble. The lowest point was this time last year, November and December. Back then, one Bitcoin was equal to just 16,000 US dollars. So why has it bounced back? Why is Bitcoin up 140% in 1 year? And should you buy it now? Well, first, let's understand this new surge. There are 3 reasons for it, for why Bitcoin is up. Number 1, the legal uncertainties are concluding. You may have heard of FTX. We talked about this on the show. It was one of the largest crypto exchanges in the world. But last year it collapsed. Its founder, Sam Bankman-Fried, has been arrested. He's been found guilty of fraud. He faces up to 100 years in prison. Another crypto boss has cut a deal. Binance chief Changpeng Zhao. He signed a $4.3 billion settlement deal with the US government. So he too is out of the picture. My point is the bad apples have been sorted. At least they seem to be. It's like Bitcoin has passed its trial by fire. So that's one reason why we're seeing a surge. Reason number 2, an expected cut in interest rates. The US Federal Reserve stopped increasing lending rates last month. They announced a pause. So naturally, the next step is reducing it. Many experts are predicting a rate cut by early 2024. If that happens, it would free up capital. More money will be available for investments elsewhere, like in crypto or gold. In fact, gold is on a bullish run of its own. It has topped $2,100 per ounce. That's a new record for the yellow metal. Here in India, the rates are shooting up. In Chennai, for instance, 10 grams of gold is priced at more than 65,000 rupees. Again, the reason is the same, an expected cut in interest rates across the world. Plus, here in India, it's wedding season, so the demand for gold is higher. Anyway, coming back to Bitcoin, reason number 3 for the surge. There is talk of a Bitcoin ETF. Now, ETF stands for Exchange Traded Fund, ETF. Listen to this closely. Imagine you want to buy Bitcoin. How would you do it? You will have to choose a crypto exchange, pay the money, and buy it. But what will be your biggest worry? Mainly security. What if your exchange goes the FTX way? What if your Bitcoin gets hacked or stolen? Will your investment be safe? The ETF tries to avoid that. It mimics the price fluctuations of Bitcoin. At the same time, you are not in possession of it. Think of it as a surrogate. So all the benefit and none of the risk. That's what the ETF gives. Plus, it's traded on traditional exchanges like your NASDAQ or Dow Jones, not in shady ones like FTX. The US market regulators are thinking about approving such ETFs. They're in talks with major asset managers like BlackRock and Grayscale. If the approval comes, Bitcoin could be mainstreamed. A lot more money will pour in. So there you have it. 3 major reasons why Bitcoin is surging. But should you buy it? Well, keep a few things in mind. 1, the ETF approval is a big if at the moment. If the green light comes, great. You can trade Bitcoin like any other stock or fund. But if it doesn't, it's a long way down. Chances are the prices will tumble again, so be mindful of that. It's a risky bet. Secondly, if you are in India, crypto is now taxed 30% on all profits. That's the tax, plus 1% on sizable transactions. So invest wisely. Having said that, there is no denying that the excitement is back. Just look at Standard Chartered. It's a major multinational bank. It says Bitcoin will reach $100,000 by the end of 2024. $100,000, that's a 143% rise from today. Compare that to traditional indices. The NASDAQ is up 27% compared to last year. The Nifty is up 10%. So if the prediction holds, there is serious money to be made. But of course, this is Bitcoin. It's the wild west of the financial system. Excitement alone cannot bring investors on board. You need to have clarity. Like, how safe is it? What is the utility like? Can Bitcoin and crypto eventually be used for transactions? Will the government make it risk-proof? All of it needs to be answered. If not, it could be a repeat of the last time. We can't just trust crypto bros to build the future of money and assets. We need the numbers to check out. Now let's talk climate. All of last week we were in Dubai tracking the biggest ever climate summit, the COP28. There are way too many people there. Seemingly endless meetings and speeches and a lot of skepticism. Questions like, what will they achieve? Especially if the summit's president says there is no science behind phasing out fossil fuels. The statement is going viral today. These are old comments made by the COP28 president. Critics say, "We told you so." The UAE is the 7th largest oil producer in the world. How can they talk about phasing out what's powering them? But like we've said in the past, it's important to co-opt oil producers, not villainize them. So what is this controversy? Can COP truly save the world? Will politics derail progress again? Our next report tells you.
On any day, Dubai's skyline is a treat to the eyes. But not last Sunday. The glitzy skyline was obscured by a thick layer of smog. The air quality was unhealthy, and it was almost ironic, because that very day, the topic of discussion at COP was health. So while the summit discussed how air quality affects our health, 70,000 participants got a live demo outside. And this was one of the many ironies of this year's climate summit. The COP28 is being held in Dubai. The venue is the Dubai Expo City, located just 11 kilometers from the Jebel Ali power complex, the world's biggest gas-fueled power station. Heading the summit is Sultan Ahmed Al Jaber, the head of UAE's state-owned oil firm.
This industry is way more effective at capturing politicians than they are at capturing emissions. And they have captured the COP process itself now and overreached, abusing the public's trust by naming the CEO of one of the largest and least responsible oil companies in the world as head of the COP.
But can these ironies derail the COP28? Well, maybe. Today, old comments made by Sultan Al Jaber went viral. And not just viral, it sparked a lot of backlash. The remarks were from an online event in November, where he says there is no science behind phasing out fossil fuels. The comments have now gone viral, especially as the country hosts the COP28 summit. Plus, fossil fuels have been a contentious point at this COP. A petrostate is hosting the summit, so obviously phasing out fossil fuels wasn't really going to be their top agenda. But the COP28 president says the idea is to find a common ground.
One statement taken out of context with misrepresentation and misinterpretation that gets maximum coverage. Again, I respect facts, I respect numbers, and these are the facts on the ground. Unfortunately, I have called on parties many times to find common ground, build consensus, and come to me with language that will work with all parties.
And this wasn't the only clashing point. On Sunday, 123 countries signed a declaration on health. It was to address the impact of climate change on health. This is the first time this issue is taking center stage. So countries were enthusiastic about a consensus. But India did not sign it. Why? Because of a lack of practicality. The declaration talks about curbing the use of greenhouse gases for cooling in the health sector. India says it's just not achievable. If it tries, it may hinder its ability to provide healthcare services, especially in rural and other areas. Which brings us to the many challenges of this COP. The world is dealing with two wars, one in Europe, another in West Asia. The global economy is still recovering from the pandemic. There is a cost of living crisis in many countries. Basically, right now, climate is the last thing on people's minds. But that doesn't change the fact that it's affecting us all. This COP28 comes at a crucial juncture. 2023 is on record to be the hottest year, and it's likely 2024 will only be warmer. A climate crisis is in full swing. We know what the solution is, and at this COP, it's time to keep the politics aside to deliver on those challenges. But can countries really achieve that, or will geopolitics derail it once again? The world is looking at the COP for decisive actions. actions that can turn back the clock on climate change. We'll know in a week if it can deliver.
Sunday was result day in India. I'm sure you followed some of it. 5 states headed to the polling booth last month: Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, Telangana and Mizoram. The results were keenly watched. After all, the general election is next year. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is looking for a 3rd consecutive term. So these state elections were supposed to give a sneak peek. What is the Indian voter thinking about? And we did get a sneak peek. The ruling party, the BJP, won 3 states: Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh. The main opposition, the Congress, won 1 state, that of Telangana. Now, the biggest headline is also the most obvious one. It is Advantage BJP. Rajasthan and Chhattisgarh were ruled by the Congress. In fact, Chhattisgarh was considered a safe state for the Congress party, yet both have flipped to the BJP. Plus, Madhya Pradesh was billed as a tough fight, maybe even a losing cause for the BJP. But again, it was a trouncing. So what is the Indian voter telling us? A lot of things. For starters, their trust in Prime Minister Modi seems unshakable. He's like a troubleshooter for his party. Can't choose a chief minister? Just bank on Prime Minister Modi. Can't build a social coalition? Again, project the Prime Minister. Facing stiff anti-incumbency, get the Prime Minister to campaign. It's something that the opposition clearly lacks: a popular and bankable face. Does that mean local leadership is irrelevant? Well, absolutely not. If you do not perform as an MLA, as a legislator, you will be pulled up. If you do not deliver as chief minister, same fate. Just look at Telangana's outgoing chief minister. His name is K. Chandrasekhar Rao. He's better known by his initials, KCR. Now, KCR contested from 2 seats in his state, and he actually lost one of them. It was his first election defeat since 1983. What does that tell you? Performance matters, not just your surname or stature. Same in Rajasthan. 25 ministers in the Congress government contested. 25 ministers. Guess how many of them lost? 17. 17 out of 25. That's around 70% of all ministers who lost the election. Again, the same message, that of dissatisfaction and rejection. Another message is on welfareism. There's been a lot of debate around this. What sort of welfare state should India be? Should India focus on handouts or empowerment or something else? Well, the voters do not mind handouts. It's amply clear. Just look at Madhya Pradesh. The BJP was supposed to have a tough time in the state. They ended up winning 160 out of 230 seats. How did that happen? Senior party leaders mentioned the Ladli Behna Yojana. They called it a game changer. It's basically a welfare scheme for women. Under this scheme, women from poor families get 1,250 rupees per month. That's around $15 a month. And clearly it worked. Many experts say the women voters flocked to the BJP. Now compare that to the state of Rajasthan. The Congress government there pushed a right to health bill. It was the first in India. It guaranteed emergency care to people even at private hospitals, the right to health. But clearly, that's not what people want. What they want is more money in the pocket. Of course, not every voter thinks like this, because this is not a one-size-fits-all country. And that's another message to the politicians. What works in North India won't work in South India. What works in South India won't work in the Northeast. In Mizoram, both the BJP and the Congress party lost. It's a new regional party in pole position there. So the BJP won the northern and central states, the Congress won the southern state, and a new regional party won in Mizoram. So different region, different voter, different choice. I guess that's the beauty of India's federal structure. But finally, let's keep the politics aside. Let's look at the broader impact on India's democracy. The turnout was good. It was higher than the last elections in Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh, but in Telangana it was lower, so maybe something to think about there. Also, the turnout was higher in rural areas compared to urban areas. So all you city people, listen up. Try to make time and vote in the next election. It promises to be a very crucial one. Vantage continues after a short break. For our next story, let's talk about a dream. The Chinese dream. It was a concept introduced by President Xi Jinping. It had three main metrics: national rejuvenation, individual prosperity, and social progress. That's what he promised. But why are we talking about that tonight? Because the Chinese dream is dying. China is dealing with an economic crisis, its youth are unemployed, and progress in general has been slow. Day by day, it's sounding less like a dream and more like a nightmare. Let's look at the economy first. Currently, Beijing is dealing with a crisis. It started during the pandemic and it kept getting worse since then. Chinese citizens are borrowing more and more money. They're unable to pay it back. The result is this: a record number of defaulters. In 2023, 8.54 million people were blacklisted from digital payment apps. 8.54 million people blacklisted, most of them between the age of 18 and 59. It's a pretty wide bracket. This is basically China's workforce. So why were these people blacklisted? Because they defaulted on payments. They borrowed money, they could not pay it back. So they were blacklisted. In 2020, the number of defaulters was around 5.7 million. This year, it is 8.54 million. That's a nearly 50% rise in the number of defaulters. And this is the world's second largest economy we're talking about. 1% of its workforce is defaulting on payments. And they're being punished for it. These defaulters are barred from a range of activities, like making payments through apps, taking more loans, applying for government jobs, even buying plane tickets. They cannot do any of that. Which brings us to the question, why is the default rate so high in China? Because Chinese citizens are cash-strapped. They're struggling to make ends meet. Let me show you this thread. It was posted on Chinese social media platform Weibo. It talks about China's youth. They're showing their savings. One Weibo user said she had only $0.14 in her savings, less than a quarter of a dollar. Others chimed in. One of them said he had around $21, and that was the paycheck he got that day, $21. And this thread goes on and on. More than 12,000 people have posted on it. 300 million people have viewed it. It's clearly quite popular. It has basically struck a chord. Chinese youth seem to have no savings. They're living from paycheck to paycheck, and many of them are unemployed. In April, 1 in 5 Chinese youth between the age of 16 and 24 were unemployed. And the numbers have been rising since. Record numbers of graduates are entering the job market. The opportunities, though, are limited. Why? The Wuhan virus pandemic. It has led to sluggish growth in China. Confidence in the economy is at a record low. Foreign investors are pulling out. Manufacturing is slowing down. Plus, there is the property market bubble. It accounts for nearly 25% of China's economic activity, the real estate market. But it's grappling with losses. Developers are losing money, apartments remain unfinished, and those who paid for them are struggling to get their money back. So there is anger, there is disappointment, and there is disillusionment. Young people in China have no jobs or savings, and these are dangerous signs for the world's second largest economy. For years, President Xi Jinping has sold the Chinese dream to his people. Anyone who worked hard could get a better life. That's what he promised. But that's not what's happening. Forget working hard. Youth are choosing farming over jobs simply because they're not getting any jobs. You can give it any spin you want. Xi Jinping calls it rural revitalization. But let's call a spade a spade. This is not about reviving the rural economy. This is about an unemployment crisis, one that is spiraling out of control. The job market is in the dumps, so the youth are heading back to farm. Doesn't sound like the dream their president sold them. Guess even dreams cannot compete with reality sometimes. You cannot hit snooze indefinitely. In the end, you'll have to wake up to the horrors. Now let's tell you about a new drug crisis. The US has been struggling with fentanyl, a deadly synthetic opioid. Fentanyl overdose has killed thousands of Americans. Controlling it has become a nightmare for the government. President Joe Biden calls fentanyl an emerging threat to his country. The drug is used for pain relief as a relaxant for muscles. But if taken if not taken in the prescribed amount, it causes drowsiness. It often leaves the person in a zombie-like state, which is why it's called the zombie drug. It was deadly as it is. Now a new one is out. It's called nitazenes, 50 times more potent than fentanyl. And it's spreading rapidly in the UK. What's worse, it is causing holes in the body of the people who use it. You heard that right. It is causing holes in their skin. Medical professionals are alarmed. They're calling it a terrifying evolution in the drug market. Here's our report.
A new breed of drugs is spreading across the United Kingdom. The synthetic opioid is called nitazenes, one of the most lethal drugs on the streets of the UK. According to reports, nitazenes are more dangerous than fentanyl and heroin. Medical professionals say that nitazene is 50 times more potent than fentanyl and up to 300 times stronger than heroin. Nitazenes first made their appearance in the UK in 2021. Traces of the opioid were found in the back of a taxi in the English city of Wakefield. Since then, nitazenes have been found in vapes, cannabis, and confiscated packets of cocaine. And it's not just England which is facing a threat. According to reports, the opioid has made its way into the Republic of Ireland. The drug has already taken the lives of over 50 people in Ireland's capital, Dublin. Authorities in the UK are raising an alarm over nitazenes. This was after they confiscated over 150,000 tablets of the opioid. So what are nitazenes and how does the opioid look? Nitazenes are essentially a white powder, but it can also have the texture of brown or yellow colored powder. Nitazenes can be packed to look like tablets. The powder is also being mixed in vaping cartridges and synthetic cannabis. The opioid is the latest drug to be sold the most on the black market, and officials in the UK are calling it a public health crisis. Here are the symptoms of what nitazenes use looks like. Some of the milder symptoms include shallow breathing and irregular heartbeat. Other symptoms are much more serious. These include coughing up blood due to internal bleeding, holes in the skin and body, falling into an opioid-induced coma, and death by overdose. Nitazenes have the British administration worried. That's because they're similar to fentanyl but more dangerous. A market that was already dangerous has become more deadly. The US has been grappling with the rise in fentanyl. President Joe Biden repeatedly called for international cooperation to tackle the menace of fentanyl.
Together, we committed to expanding law enforcement cooperation and intelligence sharing to better disrupt the flow of fentanyl and dismantle the violent chemical groups that traffic synthetic drugs in our communities. We've made record seizures of fentanyl at the border this year, intercepting these dangerous drugs before they can get into the United States to do the damage they do.
Biden calls fentanyl a threat to national security.
It's heartbreaking. It really is an American tragedy. Just in the neighborhood I'm in, next door neighbor, and just tough stuff. People are dying, and I'm committed to doing everything in my power as president to get this crisis under control.
Now nitazenes are flooding the drug market. The drug has been found in various towns across the UK. British authorities are now scrambling to contain the newest killer on the streets.
For our next story, let's go back to the year 2019. It was the month of December, flu season in India. Children began falling ill in Jammu and Kashmir. The main symptom was persistent cough. So what was the go-to solution? Cough syrups. But soon after being administered a dose, some children began vomiting. They stopped passing urine. Within a matter of days, at least 12 children, including a 2-month-old, suffered from organ failure and died. 4 others were left with severe disabilities. Here's why. All of them had been poisoned, allegedly by the same medicines that promised to heal them, cough syrups. According to the World Health Organization, this was the start of a wave of poisonings. From here on, matters only got worse. Reports began erupting from the world over. Last year, they reached a peak. Since around mid-2022, at least 141 children have died across the world in countries like Gambia, Uzbekistan, and Cameroon.
When they take this syrup, they have diarrhea and they are vomiting, and the bodies are warm. Yes, so they cannot eat. they cannot urine. So when I saw that time I go to the hospital. So when I go to the hospital, they give them the medicine and fix the catheter. But before that, the two passed away. So those company, what they did to me is painful.
This was one of the largest episodes of such contamination on record. All the deaths are believed to be linked to cough syrups. The rash of poisonings has led to lawsuits, criminal investigation, and more regulatory scrutiny in India. This includes mandatory testing of cough syrup exports. Now, a government report is out, and its findings are alarming. More than 50 companies, more than 50 companies have failed quality tests. More than 50 cough syrup manufacturers in India. This report studied more than 2,000 tests. 128 of them did not meet standard quality. That's 6% of the total reports. These 128 reports belong to 54 firms, meaning 54 syrups did not meet the standards of quality. And this is shocking. But it comes on the heels of more data. Reports say after the cases in Jammu and Kashmir, the government of India analyzed the syrup they were given, and here's what they found. The syrup contained a chemical called diethylene glycol, DEG for short. The syrup, the one that was tested, contained a 34% concentration of DEG. In July this year, the WHO released a similar finding. It tested a sample of the cough syrup linked to the deaths in Cameroon. And this sample contained 28.6% concentration of DEG, the same chemical. Do you know what DEG is? It's a toxin, an industrial solvent. It is used in car brake fluid. Medicines do contain it sometimes, and that's common medical knowledge, but it has a safe limit of usage. 0.1%. That is the safe limit. That's according to the WHO. It's the internationally accepted standard, 0.1%, not 34% that some of these syrups had. But despite the data and deaths, the danger is not over. An investigation is still on. Families are still awaiting justice while more lives are being lost. Just last week, 5 people died in the Gujarat state of India after allegedly consuming a medicinal syrup. This is unacceptable because lives are being lost and a shadow is being cast over Indian exports. Over the past 2 decades, India has emerged as a pharmacy of the world, the leading manufacturer of generic drugs. India produces more than 20% of the world's supply. It is challenging big pharma. Indian companies are challenging big pharma, breaking their hold over life-saving drugs. India is exporting a range of medicines to the global south, but today the same India is being accused of distributing death because some companies cut corners and flout rules and make substandard medicines. If more such cases emerge, if Indian regulators fail to prevent it, it will do irreparable damage to India's reputation. So it's important to crack down on such players, not just to save lives, which is very important, but also to stop India's reputation from being poisoned. Now let's turn our attention to South America, which is gripped by soaring tensions. It's Venezuela versus Guyana. They're neighbors, they share a border. They also share a long-running territorial dispute. The dispute is over Essequibo, an oil-rich region, about 2/3 of Guyana's territory. Venezuela has long claimed ownership of this region. Guyana has strongly contested it. But Venezuela is not budging. Yesterday, Venezuelans turned up to vote in a controversial referendum, a vote to take over the disputed territory. And guess what? More than 95% approved of it, approved of the takeover. So what does this mean for both the countries? Our next report tells you.
This is Essequibo. If you haven't heard of it yet, it's time you do. Because it's quite the South American celebrity. Essequibo is densely forested. It's roughly the size of Florida. It makes up about 2/3 of Guyana. And it's the reason behind a major long-running territorial dispute between Venezuela and Guyana. Because you see, Essequibo is also oil-rich. In 1899, international arbitrators set the current boundaries. This happened when Guyana was still a British colony. But Venezuela has long disagreed with this move, claiming ownership of the land, arguing that during Spanish colonial times, Essequibo was within Venezuelan borders.
Since I was a child, we have always said that Essequibo is a territory that belongs to Venezuela. The international side made a decision without asking us. They pushed Venezuela aside.
In 2015, oil was discovered in waters off Essequibo's coast. In September this year, Guyana held an auction for companies to bid for exploration licenses there. This heightened tensions tremendously, and now Venezuela is brimming with fury. Yesterday, Venezuelans voted in a referendum for takeover of Essequibo to gauge if citizens agreed with creating a Venezuelan state in Essequibo, providing its population with Venezuelan citizenship and incorporating the region into Venezuelan territory on maps. Over 10.5 million votes were received, and Venezuelan voters approved by a wide margin, 95%.
This referendum has been historic for the national union it has achieved among all Venezuelans. Today there aren't winners and losers inside the country. The only winner is the people of Venezuela and Venezuela's dignity and sovereignty. The only losers are the government of Guyana, US oil company ExxonMobil and the North American empire.
This is ours, ahead with the Essequibo.
The importance of this referendum is that Essequibo is ours and we have to defend the territory that historically belongs to us.
Venezuela is hailing this as an overwhelming victory, but Guyana has denounced it as an attempt at annexation. Guyana's president claimed there's nothing to fear. The International Court has also warned Venezuela.
The Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela shall refrain from taking any action which would modify the situation that currently prevails in the territory in dispute, whereby the Cooperative Republic of Guyana administers and exercises control over that area.
But Venezuela does not recognize the court's verdict. Despite international pressure, it's determined to assert claim over Essequibo. The question remains, what will become of its referendum? It's unclear what steps Venezuela will take to enforce its claim. This was a largely symbolic referendum, so Venezuela may not take further constitutional steps or use force. But maybe that was never the goal. For now, it seems Venezuela is making peace with the movement gaining momentum. And if this is an elephant Venezuela must eat, it's choosing to do so one bite at a time.
Vantage continues after a short break.
We are coming to you from Virugambakam. This is again one of the low-lying areas, and every time it rains, this entire stretch is inundated. It's no different this time, but the only issue is that this entire stretch continues to remain waterlogged. Vehicles will not be able to commute through this place. On the other side, if you can see, there are trees that are yet to be cleared because of the strong winds and heavy rains. This entire road is inundated. People will not be able to commute. All the shops that are located in this particular stretch, they are shut. Remember, Tamil Nadu government has declared a public holiday tomorrow as well. Schools, colleges, educational institutions, all of them will remain shut tomorrow. As per the Met predictions, the city, Kanchipuram district, Chengalpattu district and Tiruvallur district will witness heavy to very heavy rainfall, and this entire stretch continues to remain inundated and the roads are barricaded so that two-wheelers, cars, autos will not be able to pass through this area. The entire area continues to remain inundated. This among other locations including KK Nagar, Ashok Nagar, T Nagar, West Mamlam, all those are in the low-lying areas, and therefore whenever it rains, it is difficult for residents here. Most of them continue to remain indoors. Some of the cars in fact have been shifted to other localities only to ensure that if the rains continue for the next 24 hours, then there